Before we begin, answer this honestly. How much of your suffering is actually caused by other people, and how much of it is caused by how much you care? Think about it. You don't lose sleep because someone exists. You lose sleep because you're afraid of losing them. You don't feel anxious because someone is busy. You feel anxious because you need reassurance. You call it love. You call it loyalty. You call it having a big heart. But what if I told you that the real reason you stir exhausted, anxious, overthinking, and emotionally unstable is not because you love deeply. It's because you are attached without discipline. The more you care, the more you fear. The more you fear, the more you shrink. And the more you shrink, the weaker you become. In this video, you're going to confront a hard truth. Caring too much is not a virtue. It's a liability. And until you learn the difference between love and attachment, you will continue to suffer for reasons you don't fully understand. Let's break it down. 1. Attachment creates fear. The moment you care too much about keeping someone, you begin to fear losing them. That fear does not arrive loudly. It creeps in quietly. At first it feels like concern, then it feels like caution. Then it becomes anxiety. And before you realize what happened, your behavior starts shifting. You become more agreeable. You start adjusting your opinions to avoid conflict. You soften your boundaries. You silence your discomfort. You say it's fine when it is not fine. You pretend you're okay with things that slowly chip away at your self-respect. Why? Because somewhere in your mind, a calculation has begun. If I upset them, I might lose them. Fear changes you. It makes you smaller. You tolerate things you normally wouldn't stress. Disrespect becomes misunderstanding. Inconsistency becomes, they're just busy. Emotional distance becomes they're going through something. You over-explain your intentions. You justify your actions. You try to make sure there is nothing about you that could threaten the connection. You overgive. You give more time than you have, more energy than you can afford, more attention than is healthy. And slowly you shrink. You shrink your personality. You shrink your standards. You shrink your voice. You call this love. It is not love. It is fear disguised as devotion. Love does not make you anxious about being replaced. Love does not make you afraid to express your needs. Love does not demand that you abandon yourself to secure someone's presence. Fear does. The Buddha taught that attachment leads to suffering because it binds your emotional state to something unstable. This is not poetic language. It is psychological truth. Everything you attach to is subject to change. People change, feelings change, circumstances change. Even you change. But your mind demands permanence. It wants certainty. It wants guarantees. It wants reassurance that what you have today will still be there tomorrow. So when you attach deeply, you are trying to freeze something that is fluid. And when reality refuses to freeze, fear begins. You start scanning for signs. You analyze their tone. You count how long it takes them to reply. You compare how they treat you versus how they treat others. You become hyper-aware, hypersensitive, hyper-vigilant. This constant alertness is exhausting. Fear transforms your nervous system into a guard dog that never sleeps. You are always waiting for a threat, always anticipating loss. And the more you care about preserving something, the more terrified you become of its disappearance. This is the paradox. The tighter you hold, the more fragile you feel. Imagine holding water in your hands. If you keep your hands relaxed, some water may spill, but most of it stays. The moment you tighten your grip, it slips through your fingers. Attachment is that tight grip. It is the belief that without this person, this relationship, this connection, you will collapse. And when your stability depends on someone else's presence, you are no longer strong, you are dependent. Fear is weakness. Not because fear makes you a bad person, but because fear makes you predictable. It makes you reactive. It makes you negotiable. When someone senses that you are afraid to lose them, the dynamic shifts. Even if they are kind, even if they are not manipulative, the balance changes. You begin to operate from a defensive position. You think before you speak, not out of wisdom but out of worry. You hold back honesty, not out of compassion but out of insecurity. You suppress anger, not out of maturity but out of fear of abandonment. This is not emotional freedom. This is emotional captivity. And here is the harsh truth. The more you try to secure someone through fear-driven behavior, the less secure you actually become. Why? Because fear-driven behavior erodes authenticity. You are no longer showing up as yourself. You are showing up as a version of yourself designed to minimize risk. Over time, that version becomes exhausting to maintain. You feel drained. You feel tense. You feel like you are constantly performing. That tension is suffering. The Buddha's insight was simple but brutal. Suffering arises from clinging, not from loving, not from connecting, from clinging. Clinging is when your mind says, I cannot be okay without this. And the moment your well-being depends on something external, fear becomes inevitable. If they pull away, you panic. If they change, you panic. If they show independence, you panic. Because your identity is entangled with their presence. You are no longer standing on your own emotional ground. You are leaning on them. And anything you lean on can move. The goal is not to become cold. The goal is not to stop caring. The goal is to care without binding your worth to the outcome. You can appreciate someone without needing them to stay forever. You can value a connection without making it the foundation of your stability. When you stop clinging, something powerful happens. Fear loosens its grip. You speak more honestly. You tolerate less disrespect. You stop chasing reassurance. Not because you don't care, but because your sense of self is no longer dependent on external permanence. Attachment manufactures fear because it ties your peace to something you cannot control. Detach, and fear weakens. Stay attached, and fear rules you. If you want strength, you must examine what you are clinging to. Because the thing you are afraid to lose is often the thing that is controlling you. 2. Caring too much destroys your dignity. When you care too much, you stop protecting your dignity. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens gradually, quietly. You don't wake up one day and decide to abandon your standards. You slowly adjust them. You bend them. You soften them. You make exceptions. And every exception feels small in the moment. You text again when they don't reply. You tell yourself you're just being understanding. But deep down, you're anxious. You need reassurance, so you double text, then you triple text, then you pretend you weren't waiting for a response in the first place. You apologize just to restore peace. Even when you sit not wrong, you say sorry because silence makes you uncomfortable. You say sorry because tension feels threatening. You say sorry because losing the connection feels worse than losing your pride. You ignore disrespect because you don't want conflict. They make a dismissive comment. You laugh it off. They cancel plans repeatedly. You say it's fine. They respond coldly. You blame yourself. Why? Because your priority is no longer dignity. Your priority is keeping the connection. That is where weakness begins. When you care too much, you start negotiating your standards. You convince yourself that it's not that serious. You downplay your discomfort. You rationalize behavior that once would have been unacceptable. And the more you tolerate, the more you teach people how to treat you. This is not about blaming others. It is about understanding energy and psychology. When someone senses that you are afraid to lose them, they unconsciously relax their effort. They know you will stay. They know you will forgive. They know you will adjust. The one who is more invested is always in the weaker position. This is not cruelty, it is human nature. If one person is willing to walk away and the other is not, power is already uneven. Dignity means you are willing to lose what disrespects you. But when you care too much, you are no longer willing to lose it. So you compromise yourself. You stop saying what bothers you. You start overthinking your tone. You replay conversations, wondering if you were too much. You shrink your authenticity to make someone comfortable. And the cost of that shrinkage is your self-respect. The Buddha spoke of attachment as the root of suffering because attachment blinds you. It distorts perception. When you cling, you see what you want to see. You excuse what you should confront. You defend what you should question. You tell yourself, they didn't mean it. You tell yourself, they were just stressed. You tell yourself, I shouldn't be so sensitive. But beneath all of that is fear of losing them. And when fear leads, dignity disappears. True dignity does not beg for reassurance. It does not chase consistency. It does not plead for basic respect. Dignity stands firm even if it stands alone. When you care too much, your emotional state becomes dependent on someone else's behavior. If they are warm, you feel secure. If they are distant, you feel unsteady. If they are inconsistent, you feel confused. Your peace fluctuates based on their mood. That instability weakens you. Because dignity requires internal stability. It requires that you remain centered regardless of someone else's actions. It requires that you maintain your boundaries even when doing so risks losing the relationship. Most people cannot do this. Why? Because they equate loss with failure. They think that if someone leaves, it means they were not enough, so they fight to preserve the connection at all costs, even the cost of themselves. But here is the truth. Losing someone who does not respect your standards is not failure. Losing your standards to keep someone is when you care too much. You overinvest emotionally before someone has proven consistency. You offer loyalty before it is earned. You offer access before it is deserved. And once you've invested heavily, you feel trapped. You feel like you cannot pull back because you've already given so much. This is how dignity erodes. You stay in conversations that exhaust you. You stay in dynamics that drain you. You accept treatment that lowers you, all because you are afraid to detach. Detachment restores dignity because it removes desperation. When you no longer need someone to validate you, you stop negotiating your worth. You speak clearly. You set boundaries calmly. You walk away if necessary. Not with anger, not with drama, with clarity. You understand that your value does not decrease because someone fails to recognize it. You understand that your standards are not negotiable just because you are emotionally invested. Caring is not weakness, but caring without self-respect is. When you care too much, you hand over leverage. You become easier to control, easier to manipulate, easier to overlook. But when you detach, something shifts. You become steady, you become composed, you become difficult to destabilize. And that composure commands respect. Dignity is not loud. It does not threaten. It does not beg. It simply refuses to bend where it should not. If you find yourself constantly adjusting, constantly apologizing, constantly explaining, ask yourself one honest question. Am I protecting my dignity? Or am I protecting the connection? Because if you are protecting the connection at the expense of your self-respect, you are not loving, you are clinging. And clinging always costs you more than it gives. If you want strength, start here. Care, but never at the cost of your dignity. 3. You are addicted to validation. Be honest with yourself. You don't just care about people. You care about how they respond to you. That is the real hook. When someone replies quickly, your chest relaxes. When they delay, your mind tightens. When they compliment you, you feel elevated. When they criticize you, your mood drops. Your emotional state is being regulated externally. That is not connection. That is dependency. You say you care about them, but what you really crave is the feeling they give you, the reassurance, the confirmation that you matter, the subtle signal that you are chosen. This is validation addiction. It is quiet. It hides behind the language of love and concern. But if you strip it down, it is this: I need your response to feel okay. If someone's silence can disturb your entire day, you are not stable. You are externally anchored. And anything externally anchored is fragile. Think about how often you check your phone, not because you need information, but because you need confirmation. Did they reply? Did they see it? Did they react? You are chasing microdoses of reassurance. Every notification becomes a small reward. Every delay becomes a small threat. This is how the nervous system gets conditioned. You begin to associate your worth with their attention. When attention comes, you feel secure. When attention withdraws, you feel exposed. The Buddha spoke about craving as the root of suffering. Craving is not just wanting something physical, it is craving emotional confirmation. You crave to be wanted. You crave to be prioritized. You crave to be noticed. And the more you crave, the more anxious you become. Because attention is not stable. People have moods. People get busy. People shift focus. People change interest. None of this is personal by default, but when you are addicted to validation, everything feels personal. A slower reply feels like rejection. A neutral tone feels like distance. A missed call feels like neglect. Your mind interprets ordinary fluctuations as threats. Why? Because your emotional stability depends on consistent external feedback. This is weakness. Not because needing connection is wrong, but because outsourcing your emotional regulation is dangerous. When your peace depends on someone else's behavior, you are handing over control of your nervous system. You cannot relax unless they reassure you. You cannot feel confident unless they affirm you. You cannot feel secure unless they show up exactly how you expect. This is not strength. Strength is when your internal state remains steady regardless of response. Detachment does not mean you stop enjoying validation. It means you stop needing it. There is a difference. Enjoyment is light. It passes through you. It doesn't define you. Need is heavy. It grips you. It controls you. When you are addicted to validation, you start performing. You craft messages carefully. You adjust your tone to avoid misinterpretation. You try to be more interesting, more charming, more agreeable. Not because it's authentic, but because you want the response. You want the reward. And slowly, your behavior becomes strategic rather than natural. You are no longer interacting freely. You are managing impressions. This is exhausting. It keeps your mind active even when nothing is happening. You replay conversations. You wonder what they think. You imagine scenarios where you are replaced or forgotten. All of this mental activity is fueled by one thing: fear of not being validated. The deeper the attachment, the stronger the craving for reassurance. And the stronger the craving, the more sensitive you become. You start reading between lines that aren't there. You analyze punctuation. You dissect pauses. Your mind becomes a threat detection system scanning for signs of disinterest. That constant scanning is suffering. Buddhism teaches that attachment ties you to instability. Validation is one of the most unstable things you can attach to. It fluctuates daily, sometimes hourly. If your identity is built on how much attention you receive, your identity will never be stable. You will rise and fall based on external signals. One day you feel chosen. The next day you feel invisible. That volatility drains you. Real power begins when you learn to generate your own validation. When you know your worth without waiting for confirmation. When you can send a message and not check your phone obsessively. When someone's silence does not shake your foundation. This is emotional independence. It does not mean you stop caring about feedback. It means feedback no longer defines you. You respond instead of react. If they reply warmly, you appreciate it. If they don't, you remain steady. No spike, no crash. When you remove validation as a requirement, you become harder to destabilize. And here is something most people don't understand. The moment you stop chasing validation, you become more attractive. Why? Because you are no longer signaling need. Need repels. Stability attracts. When you are internally anchored, you don't overtext, you don't over-explain, you don't overcompensate. You show up as you are. And that calm self-containment creates respect. Ask yourself honestly, do I care about this person? Or do I care about how they make me feel about myself? If your mood depends on their attention, you are addicted. And addiction always leads to suffering. Break the dependency. Reclaim your internal stability. Stop needing the response. Because the moment you no longer require validation to feel secure is the moment you begin to feel free. 4. Overinvestment creates imbalance. When you care too much, you invest too much. And when you invest too much too early or too intensely, the balance of the relationship quietly shifts in a way that almost always works against you. This is not about playing games or pretending not to care. This is about understanding psychological weight. Every interaction carries emotional weight, and the person carrying more of it is almost always the one who feels more anxious, more vulnerable, and more exposed. Overinvestment begins in the mind before it shows in behavior. You start thinking about them more than they think about you. You start prioritizing their schedule over your own. You rearrange your time to be available. You mentally rehearse conversations. You imagine futures. You build emotional scenarios that have not even happened yet. While they are living their day, you are living in anticipation. This creates imbalance. In any connection, there is an invisible scale. On one side is your emotional investment. On the other side is theirs. When both sides are relatively equal, the dynamic feels stable. But when your side becomes heavier, the energy shifts. You begin to feel more urgency. You begin to feel more need. You begin to feel more risk. Because now you have more to lose. The more you invest, the more you fear loss. The more you fear loss, the more cautious you become. The more cautious you become, the less authentic you are. You start managing the interaction instead of simply experiencing it. That management drains you. It forces you into constant awareness of how you are being perceived. Overinvestment often disguises itself as effort. You tell yourself you are just being thoughtful, just being committed, just being attentive. But look deeper. Are you giving freely, or are you giving in hopes of securing something? Are you being kind because it aligns with your character, or because you are afraid of being replaced? When you give more time than is reciprocated, you begin to feel the imbalance. When you share more vulnerability than is matched, you feel exposed. When you make someone your emotional priority while they treat you as optional, you feel small. That feeling of smallness is not random. It is the natural consequence of imbalance. Scarcity creates value. This is not manipulation, it is human psychology. When something is constantly available, constantly accessible, constantly accommodating, it becomes easy to take for granted. If you are always there, always ready, always adjusting, you remove the space that allows appreciation to grow. Appreciation requires contrast. It requires the possibility of absence. When you overinvest, you eliminate that possibility. You communicate, even if unintentionally, that you will remain regardless of how you are treated. That signal lowers the stakes for the other person. They do not need to step up because you are already fully committed. They do not need to chase because you are already present. This does not mean you should withdraw affection to create drama. It means your energy should be measured and responsive, not excessive and desperate. Healthy investment grows over time as trust and consistency are proven. Overinvestment floods the connection before it has structure, and when something is flooded without foundation, it becomes unstable. Imbalance also creates internal pressure. When you have invested heavily, you begin to expect heavily. You expect quick replies. You expect priority. You expect reassurance. When those expectations are not met, disappointment feels sharper because the emotional stake is higher. You are not just reacting to behavior. You are reacting to the fear that your investment might not be returned. This is where resentment begins. You start thinking, I would never treat them like this. You compare effort. You measure response time. You count sacrifices. And even if you never speak these thoughts out loud, they build internally. Resentment grows in the gap between how much you give and how much you receive. Buddhism emphasizes balance because imbalance breeds suffering. When your emotional output exceeds what the relationship can sustain, you create tension. You stretch yourself beyond what is natural. You abandon your own rhythm to match someone else's pace. Overinvestment often leads to overcompensation. You give more affection when you sense distance. You increase effort when you sense detachment. You try harder when you feel unsure, but this usually produces the opposite effect. The more you push, the more pressure the other person feels. The more pressure they feel, the more they pull away. And then your fear increases. This becomes a cycle. You give more because you fear loss. They withdraw because they feel pressure. You interpret withdrawal as rejection. You give even more to prevent collapse. Eventually, you are exhausted, all because the scale was never balanced. True strength in connection comes from steady, grounded investment. You give what feels aligned with your values, not what feels necessary to secure someone's presence. You remain attentive, but not consumed. You care, but you do not obsess. You allow space instead of filling every silence. When you are balanced, you do not panic if the dynamic shifts slightly. You do not chase to restore equilibrium. You observe. You adjust calmly. You maintain your center. Overinvestment pulls you off your center. When you step back and regulate your emotional output, you reclaim leverage. Not leverage to control the other person, but leverage over yourself. You are no longer reacting from urgency. You are responding from clarity. Ask yourself a difficult question. If you pulled back slightly, would the connection collapse? If the answer is yes, then the connection was not stable to begin with. It was being held up by your extra effort. Healthy relationships do not require constant overcompensation. They grow through mutual rhythm, mutual effort, mutual interest. When you stop overinvesting, you stop exhausting yourself trying to secure something that should stand on its own. You allow the connection to reveal its true strength. If it survives your balance, it is real. If it weakens when you stop overextending, it was never balanced. Overinvestment feels romantic, but it is rarely powerful. Power comes from steadiness, from knowing that your worth does not increase by giving more than you receive, from understanding that connection should enhance your life, not consume it. Balance is strength. Imbalance is suffering. And caring too much without discipline will always tip the scale against you. 5. You confuse intensity with love. You think that because your emotions are strong, your connection is deep. You think that because you feel everything intensely, it must mean it matters more. But intensity is not the same as love. Intensity is emotional volatility. Love is stability. When you care too much, What you often experience is not depth. It is emotional turbulence. Your mood rises and falls depending on their tone, their timing, their level of attention. One warm message makes your day. One cold response ruins it. That is not emotional depth. That is instability. You have mistaken adrenaline for affection. Intensity feels powerful because it floods your system. It activates urgency. It creates obsession. It makes the connection feel dramatic and significant. But drama is not proof of meaning. It is proof of attachment. Real love does not require constant anxiety. If you feel nervous when they do not reply, that is not love. That is fear of abandonment. If you constantly think about losing them, that is not devotion. That is insecurity. If you feel emotionally overwhelmed every time the dynamic shifts slightly, that is not passion. That is dependency. Intensity thrives on uncertainty. The more unpredictable the connection, the stronger the emotional spikes. When someone is inconsistent, your brain becomes hyper-focused. You crave clarity. You crave reassurance. You crave resolution. The unpredictability fuels obsession. This is not romance. It is a reward system reacting to instability. When something is stable and secure, it does not create constant emotional spikes. It feels calm. It feels grounded. It does not require constant reassurance. And because it does not produce dramatic highs and lows, many people misinterpret it as boring. You have trained yourself to associate chaos with chemistry. If it feels calm, you think it lacks depth. If it feels intense, you think it must be special. But intensity is often just unresolved attachment, amplified by uncertainty. Think about how your body reacts when you are intensely attached. Your heart rate increases, your thoughts race, you replay scenarios. You feel restless. That is not peace. That is your nervous system in survival mode. You are not loving. You are bracing. True connection does not keep you on edge. It does not make you question your worth daily. It does not require constant emotional effort to maintain. When you confuse intensity with love, you tolerate volatility. You tolerate inconsistency. You tolerate emotional roller coasters because you interpret them as passion. But passion without stability is just chaos. Buddhism teaches that craving leads to suffering. Intensity is often fueled by craving. You crave their presence. You crave their affirmation. You crave their closeness. And when you crave something deeply, you experience emotional highs when you get it and emotional lows when you don't. That cycle becomes addictive. You begin to believe that love must feel overwhelming, that if you are not consumed, it is not real, but being consumed is not strength. It is loss of control. Real love allows space. It allows individuality. It allows breathing room. It does not suffocate your identity or dominate your mental space. When you care too much, your mind becomes occupied. You check your phone repeatedly. You imagine conversations that have not happened. You worry about possibilities that may never occur. Your inner world becomes centered around one person. That is not connection. That is fixation. Fixation feels intense because it narrows your focus. It magnifies every detail. It makes small gestures feel enormous. But fixation also shrinks your life. It reduces your world to one source of emotional stimulation. Love expands your life. Fixation contracts it. You know you are confusing intensity with love when you feel relief instead of peace. Relief comes after anxiety. Relief is what you feel when they finally respond after hours of silence. Peace is what you feel when you were never anxious in the first place. Relief is temporary. Peace is stable. When you are intensely attached, you swing between anxiety and relief. You feel high when things go well. You feel low when they don't. You mistake those highs for proof of importance. But real importance does not destabilize you. It steadies you. If your connection makes you constantly question your worth, it is not deep, it is destabilizing. If you are always trying to secure the bond, it is not love, it is fear-driven attachment. Intensity can feel intoxicating. It can feel meaningful, but often it is just unregulated emotion seeking certainty. The Buddha emphasized equanimity for a reason. Equanimity is balance. It is the ability to remain steady regardless of external fluctuation. When you love with equanimity, you care deeply, but you do not collapse when things shift. You can appreciate someone without obsessing over them. You can value someone without losing yourself in them. You can feel affection without fear consuming you. This is mature love. It is calm. It is measured. It is consistent. It does not require constant validation to survive. When you stop equating intensity with love, you begin to see clearly. You recognize that the chaos you once called passion was often insecurity amplified by imagination. You understand that being overwhelmed is not romantic, it is destabilizing. And you realize something powerful. The strongest connections in your life will not feel like storms. They will feel like solid ground. If what you are feeling constantly shakes you, it is not depth, it is attachment demanding reassurance. Love does not make you lose control. Attachment does. Intensity may feel dramatic. It may feel unforgettable. But if it constantly destabilizes you, it is not strength. It is emotional excess mistaken for meaning. Stop chasing intensity. Start valuing stability. Because when your emotions are steady, your power returns. 6. You are trying to control the uncontrollable. When you care too much, you are not just loving deeply, you are trying to control an outcome that was never fully in your hands. Look closely at your behavior. You overthink what you said. You replay how they reacted. You adjust your tone next time. You plan your responses carefully. Why? Because somewhere inside you believe that if you say the right thing, do the right thing, give the right amount, you can secure the connection permanently. You believe that if you manage the interaction perfectly, you can prevent loss. This is the illusion of control. The mind hates uncertainty. It wants guarantees. It wants stability. It wants predictability. So when you become attached to someone, your brain starts scanning for ways to reduce risk. You try to anticipate problems before they happen. You try to behave in ways that make abandonment less likely. You become hyper-aware. You analyze their moods. You interpret subtle shifts. You try to fix distance before it grows. You think you are being attentive. But in reality, you are trying to control something that cannot be controlled. You cannot control someone's feelings. You cannot control their long-term interest. You cannot control their emotional maturity. You cannot control whether they stay or leave. And the more you try, the more anxious you become. Caring too much turns into a strategy to prevent loss. You tell yourself that if you give more, they will value you more. If you are patient enough, they will stay. If you avoid conflict, they will not pull away. But this strategy is built on fear. You are not loving freely. You are negotiating silently with reality. Buddhism teaches impermanence for a reason. Everything changes. Everything moves. Everything evolves. When you cling to something as if it must remain fixed, you are fighting the natural flow of life. That fight creates tension. You feel it in your body. The tightness in your chest when they seem distant. The restless energy when they are quiet. The mental exhaustion from replaying conversations. This is what happens when you try to control the uncontrollable. You exhaust yourself. Control gives the illusion of safety. It makes you feel like you are doing something, like you are protecting the connection. But in truth, the more you try to manage every detail, the less secure you feel. Because control requires constant vigilance. You cannot relax. You cannot simply experience the connection. You are always adjusting, always evaluating, always evaluating, always correcting. And here is the painful truth. No amount of effort guarantees permanence. People leave even when you do everything right. People change even when you are consistent. Feelings fade even when you are devoted. Not because you failed, but because impermanence is built into life. When you care too much, you are trying to outwork impermanence. You think if you love harder, give more, stay patient longer, you can overpower change. You cannot. The more you attempt to secure someone through control, the more fragile you feel, because deep down you know you cannot fully control another person's inner world. That knowledge creates anxiety. Detachment is not giving up. It is accepting that control is limited. It is saying, I will show up as my best self, but I will not attempt to force an outcome. When you detach from control, something shifts internally. You stop monitoring constantly. You stop adjusting yourself excessively. You stop trying to anticipate every possible threat. You allow the connection to unfold naturally. If it strengthens, it strengthens. If it weakens, it weakens. You no longer attempt to manipulate the flow. This does not mean you become passive. It means you become grounded. You act from integrity, not from fear. You speak honestly, not strategically. You set boundaries without worrying about whether they will stay because of it. When you release control, you regain energy, because control is heavy. Trying to manage someone else's feelings is exhausting. Trying to maintain constant harmony is exhausting. Trying to prevent every possible conflict is exhausting. And ironically, the more you try to control, the more tension you introduce into the connection. People can feel when they are being managed. They can sense the subtle pressure, the careful tone, the unspoken expectation, and that pressure can push them further away. Freedom is attractive, pressure is not. When you stop trying to control the outcome, you become lighter, you become calmer, you become more secure within yourself. You realize that your job is not to guarantee permanence. Your job is to remain aligned with your values. You give without overgiving. You care without clinging. You express without calculating. And if the connection cannot survive your authenticity, then it was being held together by your control, not by genuine alignment. Caring too much often hides a deeper fear. The fear that if you are not constantly managing the situation, everything will fall apart. But here is what you must understand. If something collapses the moment you stop forcing it, it was never stable. Control is a reaction to fear. Detachment is a response to truth. Truth says that you cannot own people. You cannot freeze emotions. You cannot dictate the future. When you accept that fully, you stop exhausting yourself trying to fight reality. You let things breathe. And in that space, you discover something powerful. Your peace does not depend on the outcome. It depends on your ability to accept that you were never in full control to begin with. 7. Detachment is not coldness. It is strength. Most people misunderstand detachment. They think it means becoming distant, emotionless, indifferent to everything. They imagine someone who feels nothing, wants nothing, needs nothing. They assume detachment is a defense mechanism for the wounded. That is not detachment. That is avoidance. Detachment is not shutting down your heart. It is removing desperation from it. You can care deeply and still be detached. You can love fully and still be steady. Detachment does not mean you stop feeling. It means your feelings no longer control you. Right now, when you care too much, your emotions control your behavior. If they are warm, you relax. If they are distant, you panic. If they praise you, you rise. If they criticize you, you fall. Your emotional state is reactive. Detachment changes that. When you are detached, you still notice warmth. You still notice distance. You still appreciate praise. You still register criticism, but you do not collapse in response to any of it. You remain centered. That center is strength. Strength is not loud. It does not announce itself. It does not threaten to leave. It does not demand reassurance. It simply stands on its own foundation. When you detach, you stop chasing. You stop chasing replies. You stop chasing clarity. You stop chasing validation. You allow space. And in that space, something powerful happens. You observe instead of react. You notice patterns without immediately trying to fix them. You notice shifts in behavior without immediately blaming yourself. You notice inconsistency without rushing to compensate for it. This calm observation gives you clarity. When you are attached, everything feels urgent. Every silence must be addressed. Every change must be corrected. Every discomfort must be resolved immediately. Attachment makes you impulsive. Detachment makes you deliberate. Instead of sending a message out of anxiety, you pause. Instead of apologizing to prevent conflict, you reflect. Instead of over-explaining to secure understanding, you simplify. You become intentional. Detachment restores your dignity because it removes neediness. Neediness is not about asking for love. It is about fearing life without it. When you are detached, you still desire connection, but you do not fear survival without it. That difference changes your posture. You speak calmly. You set boundaries clearly. You withdraw when necessary without drama. There is no desperation in your energy. And desperation is what weakens people. When someone senses that you need them to stay, they feel your dependence. Even if they are kind, the dynamic shifts. You begin to over-adjust. You begin to overcompensate. But when someone senses that you appreciate them without needing them, the dynamic stabilizes. You are choosing them, not clinging to them. That choice carries power. Detachment is strength because it protects your inner stability. When you detach, you stop building your identity around someone else's presence. You stop measuring your worth by their attention. You stop equating silence with rejection. Your sense of self becomes internal. Internal stability cannot be shaken easily. If someone leaves, you feel sadness but not collapse. If someone changes, you feel disappointment but not destruction. If someone criticizes you, you evaluate it calmly instead of spiraling. You are no longer emotionally exposed. Many people resist detachment because they believe intensity equals love. They believe that if they are not overwhelmed, they are not invested. But being overwhelmed is not proof of depth. It is proof of imbalance. True love is steady. It does not panic at distance. It does not beg for reassurance. It does not sacrifice dignity for connection. Detachment allows love to be clean. Clean love is not possessive. It is not controlling. It does not attempt to force permanence. It understands that everything is temporary. It values the present without demanding the future. When you detach, you stop trying to secure forever. You begin to appreciate now, and that appreciation is lighter. You stop asking, will they stay? You start asking, am I aligned with myself? That shift returns power to you. You become less reactive, less dramatic, less anxious. Your nervous system relaxes because it is no longer constantly guarding against loss. You no longer cling to prevent abandonment. You accept that if someone wants to leave, they will, and if they stay, it will be because they choose to, not because you pressured them into it. That acceptance is freedom. Detachment is not coldness. Coldness builds walls. Detachment builds balance. Coldness says, I don't care about anyone. Detachment says, I care but I am not controlled. Coldness is avoidance. Detachment is awareness. When you become detached, You stop trying to own people. You stop trying to freeze feelings. You stop trying to secure guarantees. You understand impermanence. And once you understand impermanence, fear weakens. Because you are no longer fighting change. You are moving with it. This is strength. Strength is not about holding tighter. It is about standing firm, even when things move around you. When you detach, you do not lose your heart. You strengthen it. You remove fear from it. You remove desperation from it. You remove dependency from it. And what remains is calm, grounded care. That is powerful, because when you no longer need someone to stay in order to feel whole, you become whole on your own. And that is the highest form of emotional strength. Caring is not your enemy, but undisciplined caring is. You do not suffer because you love deeply. You suffer because you cling desperately. You do not feel weak because you have emotions. You feel weak because those emotions control you. The more you fear losing someone, the more power you hand over. The more you seek validation, the more unstable you become. The more you try to control outcomes, the more anxious you feel. This is not fate. It is attachment. And attachment can be trained. Detachment is not about becoming cold. It is about becoming centered. It is about caring without collapsing, loving without begging, giving without losing yourself. When you stop caring in a desperate way, your dignity returns. When you stop chasing validation, your stability returns. When you stop trying to control what cannot be controlled, your peace returns. Strength is not found in intensity. It is found in steadiness. If you want real power, stop asking how to make people stay. Start asking how to remain whole if they leave. Because the moment you are no longer afraid of losing someone is the moment you stop losing yourself.